I'm going to show you a clip from a video that when I watched it this morning, on one hand I was like, well, that's not surprising. And on the other hand, I was like, what the actual fuck? And then I'm going to come back and talk about it. So watch this.
Generally speaking, the people of Iran love their government way more than they would love being bombed and taken over by Israel or the United States. Like, very obviously. Now, cut to today. We have confirmation that the current protests going on in Iran are backed by who? Israel and the USA. In fact, a lot of the stuff that you were seeing that seems to be anti-Ayatollah, these protests and riots, actually is just people who are pro-Israel. Like, it is Zionists.
This is not only inaccurate, it's harmful and quite frankly dangerous to be suggesting that the people who are in the streets in Iran, who are willing to give up their life for the chance of freedom, are doing so because the US and Israel are telling them to do so. Do you know who is pushing that narrative? People who want to undermine these protests, who want to undermine the Iranian people. What do I know about this? I was born in Iran and I've been back multiple times since we left. I've also posted literally hundreds of videos about what's been happening in Iran since 2022 when I first started making videos.
Okay, so number one, I don't know why anybody in 2026 is listening to a goddamn thing Madeline Pendleton has to say, and I'm sure that Dr. Salas didn't know who they were prior to this video. She commented and made her video because she's an Iranian American and she's been talking about the way that people in Iran, particularly women and girls, have been trying to get free of their oppressive regime since at least 2022. I want to take a second here and piggyback on a couple of really good points that Dr. Salas made. One is that when Madeline said that people in Iran are paid protesters, that's a straight up Donald Trump MAGA talking point. Mike Johnson and Donald Trump used that exact same piece of disinformation to try to discredit the millions of people who turned out on No King's Day 1 and No King's Day 2, and also hands off before that.
Our government have said that these are fake, that people are paid to go out and protest, presumably paid by some sort of Antifa where the headquarters, no one can tell me because it doesn't exist. But anyway, that's their story, that these are not real people with real concerns who are coming out en masse to protest what our current government is doing here in the US. They're paid protesters. Why are they saying that? Why is that the narrative that they choose? Because that undermines the power of those protests. Because if people believe that the only people out marching are people who are paid, then obviously that's not a genuine, authentic movement of the people. So it's meaningless, essentially. That's what they want you to believe. But in reality, it's been millions of Americans who have taken to the streets in cities all over the country to say, hey, we are not okay with revoking funding for science. We are not okay with these attacks on immigrants. We're not okay with ICE. We're not okay with the revocation of women's rights. We are not okay with the attacks on trans people. We're not okay with any of this. But if the government can run with the narrative that none of that is true and we're all just paid actors, then they don't have to do anything about it.
Yeah, sure, there's some secret entity that's paying all of us, millions of us, to go and speak out in defense of our constitutional rights and the future of this country. Okay, sure, yeah, okay. Like so many pieces of MAGA propaganda, it relies on you not actually doing any math, but just being freaked out at the premise, or just taking the initial argument and running with it, or MAGA taking the initial argument and running with it without bothering to do 2 seconds of like basic arithmetic. And then there's the fact that what Madeline said is just so, first of all, from their bed in California, right? This like, I'm just going to pretend that I'm an expert on geopolitical conflict. I'm an expert on, no, you're not, babe, you're not. I'm not either, but I bothered to do a little bit of reading about what's happening before making this video. You clearly did not.
People who are promoting these lies that the protesters in Iran are not actually against their government, even though they've been fighting this government for decades now. You can look at protests in 2009 or 2019 or 2022 for additional examples. People who want you to believe this is all because of the US and Israel are doing that to undermine the power of the people's movement.
What's happening in Iran started out much more, this particular round of protests started out much more from an economic origin, from people in the business sphere, right? Who were fed up because they're, much like what Donald Trump is slowly doing to the United States, their economic system is just like in the toilet. Nothing is affordable. People cannot function. Businesses cannot function. But And then what happened is that there are years and years and years of all of these legitimate concerns about the ways that the regime is oppressing people, particularly women and girls, and how there's overwhelming resistance. And so these current economic protests have given a platform, have given space for people to bring all of these other issues about the oppressive Islamic regime that is in particular brutalizing women and girls, subjugating women and girls, oppressing them and denying them their basic rights. That's what's happening in Iran right now. We're seeing brave women who are willing to take to the streets and break the law, basically engage in civil disobedience. And my friend Knitting Cult Lady was talking about this. Sorry, my husband's still sick. Was talking about this in a video. Was it yesterday, I think, where she was saying a lot of Americans don't understand the level of sacrifice. This is something I've been saying for a year, the level of sacrifice, how much is required of us in this moment in order to stop this. And I think a lot of Minnesotans do, people in Portland do, people in Chicago do, and Evanston do, and folks in Minnesota do as well. It takes significant financial and bodily risk in order to stand up to the oppression of ICE and the regime. And she was likening it to these women in Iran who are marching and protesting. They are out in the streets without hijab, without covering their hair, because a woman was beaten to death for having a little bit of hair showing. They know that their fellow sisters have been beaten, blinded, brutalized in just the most horrific ways for showing their hair in public. And so instead of cowering, they know that the response to that is that you do not comply, no matter what. You do not give in to what the regime wants. They're trying to scare women into covering their hair and following their rules, right? And so the correct response is that instead women take to the streets with their hair flowing free, right? And Knitting Cult Lady was saying that's what we need to understand about resistance here in the United States. When the regime says, show me your papers, we don't suddenly say, okay, we're going to give away our rights and we're just going to show you our papers. And when they say cower in your home, we're not going to just go cower in our homes. No, we can't give in to what they want, because what they want is our submission and our subjugation. The women of Iran are showing us how we must resist here in the US, understanding that we undertake significant risk. These women are willing to risk their lives. And gosh, listening to what Dr. Salas has to say, reading up on what's happening in Iran, and then looking at what's happening in Minnesota and here in Portland, all across the United States, the way that ICE has no qualms now about shooting innocent people, shooting civilians. It makes you realize how we have this shared struggle to get free of oppression, to get free of totalitarian regimes that don't want to give you any human rights. They want to be free to gun you down in the street because you said something they don't like, because you're dressed in a way that they don't like, because you will not conform to their oppressive rules, because you will not hand over your liberty. So honestly, it's like fucking galling to see Madeline basically regurgitating MAGA propaganda, using the same line when we're looking at oppressed people who are protesting for their rights, trying to secure their own liberty, to see Madeline making the same claims as fucking Donald Trump and JD Vance. It's wild to me. It's absolutely wild. But again, totally on brand for Madeline. And I don't want to get bogged down with like shitting on an influencer who consistently has bad takes and spews them confidently from their massive platform. I really want to focus on the ways that what is happening in Iran is linked to what's happening in the United States, and how we need to look to other resistance movements around the world. Most Americans are fighting fascism for the first time. And so we need to look to other resistance movements and what they have successfully done. We also need to look to our immigrants here who have fought successfully against oppressive regimes elsewhere. They know what they're doing. We need to look to them, learn from them, support them in this moment. And also, we need to be careful about who we're listening to on the internet and whose opinions we are accepting uncritically just because they have large platforms.